Right, so now at the stage of trying to work out the gearbox side. Now, I've kind of roughly chucked the engine in on this side. However, the issue is that the gearbox is now touching on this side of the rail, which means I'm going to have to modify the rail to even just mock it up. So I'm going to show you that in a minute. I've also decided as well, by looking at that I'm going to modify this side. Now, I discussed in previous clip that this was just going to sit on top of there, which it can do, but it'll give us a 30mm lift as over the original placing of the engine when it was a 1.4. I had originally spaced my 1.4 engine by 25mm, which was perfect. I had just enough bonnet clearance, and I never dented obviously the sump at the bottom. So I'm going to go back to 25mm, because in theory, obviously the engine sat, if you can imagine this pen, the engine sat like this at the moment. If I can bring the red side down just by the 5mm of the thickness of this, it's down to like that. So it means that the other end, the grey end, doesn't need to go up so much. So by dropping this side down very, very slightly, it'll mean I've got to cut into this rail a lot less. Now, I'll show you this side. The rail, if it was sat at the front, it would clear. And with a bit of a twist on it, in theory, the engine should come further forward very slightly. But you'll see that clears perfectly here to the point I can get a pen down, and I can get a pen in between it. So as you get further back here where the rail or horn, whatever you want to call it, kind of kinks out. So what I need to do ideally is mark a little bit back, mark up, across and back down, and then I need to square that section out. So what I mean by that is I need to cut it with a grinder very carefully. And this is the plate here. Now, it's not a very, I've not cut much out in the terms of depth, as in going that way, because at the minute I kind of want to keep this as thick as possible. So it's a case of there'll be a plate that will kind of go in like this, but also give me the ability at the minute, if I need to move it slightly further that way, I can do by just kind of flap disking this back slightly, and that will then give me kind of the width. Now, stick steel, as you can see, so again, it's basically 3mm by the looks of it. So the stuff I'm going to be using will be the same thickness. In fact, it is exactly the same, so I'm going to be replacing it with exactly the same. You could put 5mm in. I wouldn't go any lower because you want to keep the strength in this part. And the kind of the plan would be, obviously using new metal, is I'm going to have a piece that goes kind of up in there, like that. And then I'm going to weld it all. I'm going to have two obviously side bits and just make sure it's welded all the way around. Obviously I'm going to clean it up before welding it, but now I'm going to kind of put the engine back in. I'm going to modify it, obviously, as I said in the previous clip, just to drop it down a bit. I have seen this lip, which has come in handy. Now this is slightly over the 5mm, it's more like 10mm. But I think, to be honest with you, I'm going to keep this lip on, and this is going to be the kind of the lowest part of the mount. It will make sense when I do it, but if I keep this lip in, I should be able to have something then really nice to get a real good weld all the way around. So plan's going to be, I've marked where roughly the mount sits. However, then I'm going to give it a bit more, so I'm going to literally square, as you can see this bit here, I'm going to square that off, and I'm going to notch down here. And the same with this, where it comes round, as soon as it gets to about 90 degrees, I'm going to come this way, and I'm going to drop down, and then I'm going to mark the line across here, which is going to be the same thickness as this depth. So I'm going to measure that, put that on here, and that'll give me the mark and the cut line, which will mean then what I can be able to do is slide in a piece of steel, which is this nice thick, this is 5mm steel, good solid steel. Bear with me, I've got one hand. Yeah, so this kind of thick steel is going to be in, and then this is what I'm going to weld up to have this as one mount. I'll put a little gusset triangle in possibly, just to add a bit more strength. But yeah, basically it should then notch this engine mount down about, by the time I've done about between 5 and 10mm, that'll be perfect, pretty much what I want. So yeah, I'm going to start cutting it now. I'm going to mark up and give it some cutting. Right, so as you can see, a section of steel has been cut out, which is this piece here. That was the bit that kind of originally sat like that. It's been chopped out, again, like I say, as near to thickness as I could. But also obviously additionally allowing me to put this 5mm plate in. Now, on the minute, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to combat two things. As well as making the mount, I'm also trying to take out this horrible angle that seems to be there from factory. If you can see, it goes off and it's not square. So I want as much clearance as I can, obviously, on the side of the engine. So I thought at the same time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this tacked in where it needs to be. I'm going to then cut this. I possibly don't even need to relief cut this. I may just be able to persuade that back with a hammer to get it nearer to here. And to be honest, it probably might even just bend, and then I can get that nicely welded up there, and that should give me more of a square. It will obviously go out where it goes to the chassis rail, but more importantly, it'll be more square up this top bit where I need it. Down here, there's no problem whatsoever. It's more near the top. So at the minute, it's kind of basically get it tacked here, get it tacked back here, get it tacked here, get it tacked here to get this in the right situation. Now, I could just go and do it by eye like this. Looks perfectly fine. However, I've got one of these angle tools. So the plan kind of is to match the original angle as much as possible. So normally I work within like 0.5 of a degree, which is half a degree. Just because the tool's not collaborated brilliantly, and also half a degree you're not going to notice at all. So yeah, zeroed that off, and then I'm checking that this angle here is the same as this angle here. So I'm kind of putting it exactly how it was before. So again, I can be within 0.5 of a degree personally. So 0.1, exactly, that's perfect. Now I'm going to flip around and make sure that the rear is this angle here. Goes across here is the same as this angle within 0.5 of a degree. So again, I've got to zero it, which isn't brilliant because it's a bit of a nightmare to get on. So zeroed, like I said, the tool's not the best. Yeah, we'll work with that. So yeah, I said 0.1, so I'm looking for 0.6 really, or 0.0. So yeah, that's well within, that's between 0 and 0.6, which is perfect. So yeah, happy days with that. Just make sure that's on the right stroke of the angle, which it is. Yep, that's only 1 degree, 0.1 degree out. So yeah, perfect. So that's basically ready to tack. So I'm going to tack weld it with a MIG in these spaces, and then I'm going to come back to it because I'm going to potentially, I don't know yet, I might put a filler panel in here and a filler panel in here. We'll see how it looks in a sec. But yeah, tack, 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 and then cut, cut, hammer back, tack, tack. You can probably see the tacks. There's 2 at the rear and 1 at the front. And then I've cut the rear relief cut on the back here, and then I've used clamps just to kind of pull in. And then I'm going to weld down here, so I have much more of a square mount with a better amount of clearance just here. I've left a little bit of tab on there just because it was easier for me to line up, but I'm going to cut that off once I've put some tacks in, so now I can get a nice weld all the way across here and then round. And then that's probably solid enough once it's had a weld at the back, but obviously to make it look a bit tidier, I'm going to probably cut this bit off, maybe just do a nice corner piece for it. But that's purely just to make it visually more pleasing, to be honest. But yeah, and then once the mount's done, obviously this bit isn't cut to a perfect shape. It's roughly to shape, because once I've got the engine mount where I want it, I'm going to drill and tap this. I'll still be able to add a bolt on the bottom if I wanted to go down that route, which I may do. I'm not 100% sure. I was going to weld captive bolts on, but it's going to make it easier not to do that just yet, because there could be quite a bit of adjustment on this piece. But once I know exactly where my mount's going, I'm going to then trim this to fit. So it won't look as ugly as this. It'll probably be a lot smaller and trimmed round and stuff. But it's always best to have more metal than less metal, because it's easier to take it off than it is to put it back on. So I'm going to get welding this up now. Right, so as you can hear the welder whirring in the background, fan going on that, which suggests that I've been doing a bit more welding. Now, I've kind of cut out a bit more on that chassis leg, simply because I want to get the engine tucked. There's not a massive amount of metal come out. Obviously, it's come out further higher up, but the width, I've not really attacked any of that. So hopefully that should be sound. But we're going to check that tomorrow. The main thing is I've kind of got to get this side done to then be able to drop the engine on this side to then lift the gearbox up for this side. And then when I've completed that side, obviously it's then onto the rear support mount, or the lower gearbox mount, whatever you're going to call it. So yeah, this side's basically pretty much done. Using the original mount, I've just dropped it down just to compensate for the thicker plate at the bottom, so I can get it to OEM height. I've also decided to persuade this to come in, so from the top I've got more clearance, so it's nice. Obviously an MOT spec continuous weld around there. I mean, it's not the prettiest, but it is what it is. It's nice and solid, so that's that. And then the bracket isn't fully finished, because obviously at the minute I don't know kind of 100% where that's fitting. So if that fits back there, then obviously the bracket will be trimmed to suit. So yeah, obviously this end's not finished. And also when I come to put the holes in, wherever that's going to be, I'm going to drill and tap this metal, but I'm also then going to weld a captive nut on the rear. So I've got a nice big amount of thread for the bolt to go in, because obviously it's an engine mount. I mean, it's not likely to go anywhere as it is, but I kind of want more than 5mm. If I can get 15mm of thread on, that's tasty, that's enough. So yeah, that's kind of how that is. Obviously confirmed throughout that it matches the same angle as it did before, both that way and that way. If you're slightly off, obviously the mount will take it up anyway, to be honest, but I'm a bit anal with stuff like that. So yeah, job's good. And so that's that side. The other side is been cut further up, but the width, as in the depth, I've not cut a massive amount. It's probably only about 5 to 10mm. So I'm going to chuck the engine in tomorrow, check out kind of what that side. I'm going to obviously drop the engine on the side that I've done, jack up this side, see what's going on down there. Fingers crossed that's the stage where I could just kind of clean it out, weld it up. And then if that's all kind of done and welded on that side, we're going to then make the top part of that mount. And then hopefully I should be able to hang the engine on those two. And then when I can do that, I can then obviously go on to the rear mount, which is that cheeky little fellow down there. And I'm just going to adapt that to obviously fit the gearbox. So I should have then obviously the 3 mounts. It should hopefully be hanging in its own weight. That's the plan. That's took me a day to do what I've done, which is a load of the cam outside of it. Obviously calculate, fabricate this side. I reckon, to be honest, another day I would have got that welded up, the engine mount mate and the rear one. Obviously it's taking me a lot longer because I'm doing videos of literally each step. But yeah, it's not a long process. I reckon you could do this in a week, obviously with making the shafts at home yourself and stuff. So yeah, jobs are good, and tomorrow crack on with it, I think. So yeah, if there's anything you want to know, just give us a shout. Right, so this is a Lupo TDI 3-cylinder. Just basically looking at the angle that the engine sits in. As you can see, the cam cover is far from straight in terms of kind of it's higher on the left than it is the right. So the plan of that is to then transfer that angle into the Arosa, because obviously the Arosa is the same as the Lupo. And I don't think it's been too bad. We've probably corrected some of the angle, to be honest. Obviously, it would always look a bit more extreme with it being a longer engine. However, positioning wise, I think that looks good. Obviously, it needs to rotate very slightly, just a touch, but we'll rotate that once we've got the other mount done, because then it's a case of just pushing the engine forward from the bottom, which will rotate that. But yeah, angle wise, we've still got the OEM spec kind of angle in it. Just going to double check bonnet clearance between the two, but to be honest with you, I think it'll be fine. So yeah, happy with that. So now it's a case of just having a look down this chassis rail side. As you can see, there's loads of room, so I'll be able to box that in nicely. Got loads of clearance and everything, and I'm probably going to make up the bracket side of this to work with the golf mount. So yeah, happy with that. Spot on.